Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're going to talk about description in gaming. Now, when we came across this topic, I said, didn't we already talk about this? And I know we've talked about it in many different ways, but I couldn't actually find an episode called Description. So, and I looked. There's way too many episodes now to figure these things out.
I think I looked. I looked, and I couldn't find anything that was titled description.
And I know we've talked about it when we talked about setting the scene and different kinds of things like that, but I don't remember exactly what we talked about it. So obviously you won't either. So we'll just do this one, and there you go.
We're specifically talking about descriptions and scenes, so I don't think we had this topic before.
Right. Anyway.
So in video games. In role-playing games, the GM, lore master, whatever you want to call him, he or she usually describes the scene. They tell you where you're at. The players go, we want to go to the tavern, well, no matter what kind of game it is. They go, okay, sure, you find one. Right? That's how it works. And they go, we're going to go inside. Sure. And so you might say, oh, there's a few patrons in there. Or you might not even describe it too much. People go, oh, so what does it look like? And so I think when players are asking for information, I think they really want to see what's going on, right?
I think you're correct. I think that all the things I've read about describing scenes and describing your world to the players is it's a very important part of the game, and it is, because when I play, I want to know what's going on, and the way you figure that out is either the GM tells you what you're seeing in the bar, or he asks you, what do you see, depending on the kind of game it is, right?
That's true.
So if he's setting up the scene for you, there's important things in the description. You don't want it to be too detailed, because then you're going to lose your players as they're sitting at the table. But you want it to be detailed enough where they get the feeling of the bar, right? There's a difference between saying that you walk into the tavern and there's some patrons eating food and having drinks, or you say you walk into a tavern and it's smoky and it smells like old ale, or there's someone in the corner that looks suspicious, right? There's different ways to describe stuff.
Right. And it's going to evoke a different feeling too, right? When you walk into a tavern and you say, oh yeah, there's patrons in there, and then players go, oh, okay. But if you describe it as smelling like old ale, you're like, ugh. You get a feeling of what kind of inn or tavern this is.
That means they don't clean it very well. It doesn't smell like, what is it?
Pine Sol.
Pine Sol, exactly.
Or if you go into a tavern and you're describing you say, oh, patrons are there, they're eating, and you can smell
beef stew
and fresh bread being baked.
Yeah.
And then that's going to evoke a different kind of place. One, they have good food.
Yes.
Right? And two, it's clean.
Right.
It doesn't smell like ale and stinky bodies. So I think just real simple. I mean, that is a real simple description, and adding elements to a scene that can change the way the players see the scene.
Right.
Right. And I think that's amazing. I think that's amazing how if you just go by sight alone, I think we're listening to some people saying, include more senses, and that'll give it more of real effect. And I'm guilty as charged. I don't do that every once in a while.
Well, it depends on the game. There's also people that go, I'm going to say, overboard on the description, and I've seen it, and I've been sitting in games where the GM really wants you to be immersed in their setting,
right?
And the way they're doing it is they're going to tell you all the details. It's like, I love Robert Jordan. I love the Wheel of Time series.
I was going to mention Robert Jordan.
And I love his descriptiveness. But my friend Chris and even Kathy and Saul, because he listened to those two, so it really got to him after that.
Undue influence.
Was that he likes his description of stuff is so flavorful. And when you're reading a book, but you're reading the 8th book in the series, and he's still doing the description the same way he did in the first book, to some people, that's overboard. To me, it's like, oh yeah, I get that. It brings you back to the feeling of where you are, right?
Right.
But when you're playing a role-playing game, you're not reading a book. You have 6 people sitting around a table or online. And online it's a little easier because you can put a picture of the tavern, right, that you're thinking of. But if you don't describe certain things to people, everybody has still a different idea of what it is.
Right.
But if you say, oh, well, when you walk into this tavern, it smells like old ale and smoke, then you're going to know the kind of tavern you're in versus you walk into a tavern with fresh bread baking, and you can see that it's nice and clean, right? Just by that description.
Yeah, I think I hadn't even thought about that, is that when you do that, when you do describe like those two different dichotomies, the players are going to see, what is it, different possibilities in that place, right? One, they're going to make assumptions about the innkeeper,
The
or
clientele.
the tavern, the clientele, and all kinds of infer, like, well, am I going to be able to find, let's say you're looking for a thief, is a thief going to be here? For some reasons, I vote, in my mind, yes, because it's a seedy place, and rogues are seedy, or thieves are seedy, but it doesn't make any sense.
The thief could be in either one of them.
Yeah, it could be, but for me, I'm thinking, oh, it's a seedy bar.
But if you're playing Shadowrun, and well, all bars in Shadowrun are probably seedy, but whether they're nice or not, or anything, people know the difference between I'm going to say people, and this is just my personal experience because I don't know what people know. For me, I know the difference between a seedy bar and a nice bar because I've been in both of them. So I've seen the type of people are going to be there, versus the type of people that are going to be there.
Exactly.
The yuppies versus the working class people, that kind of thing. Different
right.
kind of.
No.
But everybody has their own idea. So even if I tell people that I'm sitting around a table with that you walk into a tavern and it smells like beer, some people are going to go, oh, well, maybe someone spilled a beer. Yeah. And some people are going to go, oh, this place hasn't been cleaned in 6 months, right?
That's true. You're right, because everybody takes things differently. We've all played that game of telephone as a kid, where you say something and it travels through one person to another person, and everybody's going to have a different. By the time you get back to the last person, the first person, that's not the same word that you said, because everybody's going to hear it differently, and if they don't hear it clearly, they're going to, okay, that's the word they said, even though that's not the word they said. So it changes, right? So everybody's different. So everybody's going to hear what you say and apply their own vision of what you're saying. Yeah. I think there was a time when we went to that. We were at a Pacificon, and the guy was saying, "May everybody close their eyes and describe something, and then when they open their eyes, give them a picture of what you described." And that way, one, you got their imagination rolling, and two, when they open their eyes and you show them a picture, you're cementing your vision instead of like all these various visions that they could be looking at, right?
Right.
Because when you say, oh, it's an old bridge, it spans a water, that's white water rapid, everybody's going to see something different.
Yes, and depending on what games you played in with bridges, you're going to have ideas about what's going to happen.
I always think of like a elven bridge, like the one that Aragorn and what's her name were kissing on. Was that in the movie? Maybe not, but I've seen that picture.
I don't know. I always think of a bridge as a rickety bridge that I'm probably not going to make it across.
Yeah, we played last night. It was a successful bridge crossing. There was a log that somebody had fallen over a river, and we successfully crossed it. Even though Mike's character almost took one, and he did a kind of like a Benny. He did a saving his luck roll. He made it. Scenes can be very important, and I think the more descriptive you are, the better it is. But you're right, there is a limit that you want to not go over as far as being too descriptive, right? Because you do want some of the players to come up with their own stuff, and maybe when they like, oh, is it like this? They imagine something, and then they tell you what they think it looks like. I think it matters more to the player, right? Because they go, oh yeah, I could totally see that. To me, when that happens, players are really buying in, right? They're really in your game and want to keep playing, and you have a lot of, what do you call it? You have their attention.
I think as a GM, that's important, right? If it doesn't matter to you what kind of tavern it is, right? And you tell them, you walk into the tavern and you smell bread baking, and then somebody says, oh, they're very excited about it, and they're going to tell you what they see, right? So you can use whatever they say as the part of the
right.
incorporate it because there's no reason not to.
Right, and I think that's helpful for the GM. I'm totally for alleviate the weight that the GM has in running the game. And if you can partial out some of that work to the players, like using their imagination to fill in these little description gaps that you don't really one, you may not care too much, or two, you get tired of coming up with stuff sometimes, right? Like, oh, how many bars or taverns do characters been in? Thousands probably, right? And so you try to make each one different and stuff. So I think when you allow players to come up with stuff and say, well, and then they go, and they might ask, oh, does it have this, or is there a piano in the corner, or whatever?
Sure.
Is there a stage? And then they go, oh, what kind of stage you're looking? What kind of stage you're looking for? And then they describe it. They go, oh yeah, that's exactly what's happening, or that's what's there. And I think that really does help immerse the players in your game. And I think when you're building a game or you're running a game, that's what you want. You want your players to be in the world that you're creating or helping create. And I think if you allow them to help you with descriptions a little bit, and we talked about that before, I think they really get excited about playing.
It helps with player agency for them to
Yes.
for people to feel like they're helping you to not only create the world, but they have some say in what's going on, right?
Right. And I think we've talked about it before, and how much we like the game. Feng Shui says that it's actually codified in the rules that the players should help describe the scene.
Feng Shui is one of those games that does it very well because you can set up a scene, right? But then the players have an opportunity to whatever they envision in that scene, because it's a movie kind of thing, right? So if you need a jackhammer to be there, then the GM isn't going to tell you it's not there.
Well, I mean, unless it's an office building. I mean,
well, maybe they're doing construction.
Okay, so you can do that. I think, I don't know if I allow anything nilly-willy, as some people say, or as I say.
Only you.
To put stuff in. But if it makes sense, then it's something that I would like a construction scene, I can see a jackhammer. Or a street scene where they're on a street and maybe there is some street construction. Okay, I can see a jackhammer. But why would a jackhammer be laying around? I don't know.
In a nice restaurant?
Yes, probably not. But in a nice restaurant chandelier you can swing on and stuff like that. I think as long as it makes sense, unless we really want to play a game of anything happens, then it can get kind of crazy.
So there's reasons why the description is important, right? One, you want the players to be able to feel like they're there. Also, it's important to just let them know what they're seeing,
right? And
let them come up with how they feel about it. You don't want to tell them that, right?
Yeah, you don't want to tell them about their feelings. Well, like you go into the bar and
you're very suspicious of everybody. Yeah. you don't want to say that. That's like leading them in a certain direction, where as the GM, you're just supposed to give them the scene and let them play out what they want to do.
Objection, right? Your Honor, leading the witness.
Yes. So the man in the corner looks very suspicious to you.
Yeah, you don't want to do that, but you just describe the person.
Yeah.
You were talking about how the characters perceive things and not how...
I don't know if we were talking about it on the podcast.
Oh, no, we weren't.
Because we got interrupted. Yes. I was saying that...
You were.
When one of the things when I was doing the research on this topic was people were saying that you want to describe it how the players would perceive it, how the character would perceive it, not necessarily the player.
Right.
That because there's metagaming and there's in-game, right? So in-game, you're describing the scene. In their heads, there might be metagame stuff.
Right.
Now, I'm not totally sure what the difference is between describing it, how the player's going to perceive it versus what you're thinking in your head.
This might be taking some, player agency away from a player, but like maybe describe it to the different players depending on their character class or the type of character they are. Like, for example, to the rogue thief who walks in, scoundrel, depending on the game you're playing, he'll notice that, this person has a fat wallet or is spending a lot of money, or he is has a very expensive wine at his table.
You can't see Saul's eyeballs, but when he's describing that, his eyeballs are getting bigger and bigger because he's thinking about what the rogue is going to see.
Right, and then that's all you say. Well, he has a very expensive bottle of wine sitting there, and you might notice that he has a large necklace. Where a fighter or a brute or whatever, depending on the game, bounty hunter might see somebody describe the person instead of like things that he has, like this demeanor, or like you immediately think, oh, this guy he has a bulge under his jacket, like like one of I forget what they call them. The cops have the detective shows. The cops used to have the pistol underneath the jacket, and so you would describe, depending on who is asking and who's in the scene, you would describe it differently because they would notice different things.
If they're asking,
if
you're describing it to the whole party and you stop to discuss this expensive bottle of wine on one table, everybody's going to focus on that table, right?
That's
trying
true.
to figure out stuff.
Yeah, I guess you would say I don't want to take player agency if I just give them that information, or do I wait do I wait for that character to ask for that stuff?
That's the ultimate thing, right? What is it that you want to be descriptive enough so they know where they are, but you don't want to be too descriptive that they think you're trying to push them in one direction, especially if you're not, right? If you just are in a tavern for just, you're there.
Right. Just for some downtime.
Yeah.
Let's go to the bar. Let's go shopping or whatever. Yeah. You're right. I got to wonder how much description to put in and how much, because you could lead the party down the rabbit hole, right?
Without even meaning to, right?
You're just throwing out descriptions left and right.
It's like when you're throwing in red herrings and when you're doing plots, right? Or you don't want to do that because those red herrings might be where they decide to go,
and they might think those are the utmost important things to do, follow up on. Which unless it's something they could easily dismiss in very short order, but I would definitely I would definitely limit a red herring to a very short encounter type of thing. Maybe not 10, 15 minutes kind of thing that they can get out of the way. You definitely don't want to spend a whole session dealing with a red herring.
Interestingly enough, I was reading about what people thought that you should describe for your role-playing games, and they came up with all of these things that I would have never thought of. Like they say, when you're using description, make sure that it's advancing your plot. I don't know how to do that. I mean, if you're going into a bar or you're on a road, maybe you meet someone who's going to advance the plot, but I don't necessarily. When depending on how you run a game, right, you kind of want the players to figure out how to advance the plot versus you describing it to them. That's just I don't know. There were some things that I thought were interesting but odd.
I think I could see that if maybe the characters are lost, or the players, I should say, are lost and don't know which way to go. So you, with descriptions and stuff like that, you can move the plot forward, at least the plot you're thinking of. But when it comes to the players, their players' own initiative, I mean, you really got to, for me, it's a fine line to walk. It's pretty hard to walk too when you don't want to lead the witness, right? That's the problem I have, is hitting them with I mentioned it last time, the clue hammer, right? Oh, this is the way to go. And some people might take exception to that. They could want to figure it out themselves. And I think maybe being too descriptive in that sense, that leading the players and not letting the players have agency. That's interesting. I had not even thought about using descriptions or scenes like that to advance it. And not everything has to advance the plot, though. That's another thing. Yeah. Is that unless you're Call of Cthulhu and paranoid about everything, where not everything has to make sense, or not everything has to deal with what you're going for. Because in Call of Cthulhu, everything has to do with what you're doing, right? And if it's not, then it doesn't matter, because if both the players and the characters
don't care,
or no, but they're on edge about what's going to happen. So
it better have something to do with what's going on, or.
So I think that's interesting. I never thought about advancing the plot by being descriptive. But I think you can. I think you can because, for example, remember I was talking about that lady asked me if I didn't have a map, was it part of the adventure in the written adventure? And I said yes, it is part of adventure, but I didn't have a map because they didn't make a map, and two, maps are usually used when there's a probability of
combat.
So the same can happen if not the same thing, but in a similar vein, if you describe something too much, like somebody, like you said, they're gonna go, "Oh,
that's the one."
Why is he spending so much time with that description of this person?
That's why when you're doing descriptions, you want to keep them short. You want to maybe make sure that it's invoking sense stuff, like what you smell, what you see, what you hear, but you don't want to be describing. You don't want to go down the list. Okay, so when you walk into this bar and this is what you smell, this is what you hear, this is what you see.
Yeah, definitely should be more natural than that.
Yes. So because then people are going to be looking at you going,
checkbox. Get that checked off. Smells, touch, taste. Is there taste in this place? Yeah, I definitely don't want that to happen. And I think as long as you do that kind of stuff, and the players kind of go, oh, okay, he's just describing, giving us a feel of the room. But then after players start asking stuff and asking about specific, something that catches their eye, and you go from there, I think that's the best way to do it. Is don't be too descriptive, because then you're narrowing what the characters,
what they're going to ask about,
what the players see, and what they envision, and what they're going to think about asking. But leave it more open, and then using their questions, you can give them more detail, and then they can make up their own minds as if this is something that's important or not.
Right. I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about description, and one guy said one of his players always ask about what kind of food, what's on the menu. And so he said he made up a chart because every single time the guy would ask what's on the menu. So he made this random chart.
Oh, yeah, I do all that too.
And he would roll, and then he would go, oh, today it's cordon bleu and blah, blah, blah. Right. And because that was like important to that character, right? He wanted to know.
The player
wanted to know. And it was like when the boys were little, Alan always liked to go fishing. Yes. And so wherever we were, in whatever town or village or anything.
Especially village.
So in whatever town or village or wherever we were, if there was a river or a pond or something, then Saul would say, oh, look, there's a river. And Alan would go, oh, can I go fishing? And then they would play out this scene where he would cast the line and roll to see how many fish he caught.
Right. He was very happy with that. It was interesting because I do remember that, but I don't remember like why I did that, or if I figured he just was interested.
Because he really liked it the first couple times you did it, so you just kept doing it. So it became a thing, right?
Yeah.
So the same with this guy. Every time they went into a tavern, he wanted to know what was on the menu. So
and the guy the GM was like, "Oh man,
I have to come up with something."
Right? He kept thinking, "Oh, mutton stew and blah blah blah." Right? So yeah, you're right. He had this chart that he made, and then he would roll dice, and then he would tell him exactly. What
it was a randomized table, right? Yes. Yeah,
which I think is pretty neat. I think that's interesting, and I think a lot of GMs do this. A lot of GMs will accommodate players who are like have a routine or something like that, or have something that they'll regularly ask about. A lot of times, people will ask about just like they go into a new city or to a new town or whatever. Where's the new tavern? I want to go to the gambling house and stuff like that.
Or they'll ask about where the magic shop is because they want to see what magical items they can find or what they have to, the weapons they need to get. Right.
I think that one, as a GM, that is a clue as to what they like about stuff or what they want to do, and two, it's something that you realize that's what the players really like, and it's just something that it could be quirky, but it's something that you should accommodate the players with. Like Alan and his fishing, I accommodated him, and there was usually a stream or a pond nearby because people would go off. I think this would be like the shopping stage, right?
Yeah, or the down. You're in a village. You have a couple days to kill.
Right. What are you
going to do? And then that is part of role playing that is kind of fun, right? Because then you get to see what your players want to. Maybe they're looking for clues, or maybe they just want to resupply their provisions. Right. But
a lot of times
they want to take a bath and, find somewhere, get clean clothes and stuff like
I
that.
remember that too.
Because you're trekking out in the middle of the forest and going through bogs and stuff. When you get into a town, what do you want to do?
Sometimes you're on the back of a horse and they can smell like animals.
Yes.
Whatever smell that is. And they sweat and you sweat. And there's dirt and it can be rather icky and messy.
So description is in games is a lot of times just getting people to see where they are and then letting them do whatever they want, right?
I think you could really help yourself if you want. I think kind of with names, have a list of names, or you can, like that guy did. You can make your own little chart about what's in a tavern, right? It is the mood or what it looks like. And then there's always a chance that a player might ask, "Well, I want a nice higher end tavern instead. I don't want to waste my time with a seedy one because maybe they want to actually stay at a room or inn."
Yeah.
So that changes what descriptions you're going to use. But if they don't ask and they're just randomly going somewhere, I think having a nice table. Sometimes when players come at you and you're like, "What?" Like that guy with the menu, and then what's on the menu today? And you don't want to sound the same as a GM. You want it like this one GM said. I forget what he was talking about, but that the players want to believe, and it helps immersion, that the world is the way it is, that you're not making stuff up right then and there. When you have stuff available already, when people ask you a question and you give them the answer, like, oh, this was planned out. Whether you've rolled dice before or whether you just had a list of names or a list of descriptions about places that you could just look, and then especially if you look down and you read it, then people go, oh, we're on the right track, or oh, we're in this.
Versus the GM looking off into space going, well, this is the third inn that you've come along and they're serving mutton stew, right?
They all have mutton stew.
Everywhere has the same food in this world.
Is this sheep mutton?
Yes.
I don't think I've ever had mutton stew then. We don't cook with lamb. So I think it's something that's real easy that you can include in your game. Just simple descriptions. And like I said before, and Jolene said, is that it helps the players get immersed in the world. And it could actually be a starting point for people who look at a certain description or hear a description and say, oh, I'm going to investigate further. And it may lead to a side adventure, side quest. Or like you said, if you include it into the main plot of the whatever your GM is machinations are, or your GM machinations are, you can include that stuff in pretty easily, especially when players really buy into something.
And I know that we spent a lot of time in this episode talking about taverns and stuff,
yes.
But that's because most places or most games that you play, there's going to be a bar or a meeting place, right? And that's like the most common place when you walk into a new town that there's an inn, right? And they have a bar, or there's a bar and it's next to an inn, or
right.
That kind of thing. So I know the description of that it applies to everything in the game, not just the tavern, right?
Right.
So when we say you're describing the tavern, it could be describing the scene of you walk onto a farm and this is what you see, or you're walking down a street, and its description is for the whole game, not just the tavern.
Right. And I think one GM was talking about the docks, right? Oh, it's the docks. There's boats out there. But there's different things.
That means different things to different people.
Right. And so when you say, well, it smells like fish, you hear seagulls walking everywhere. You smell salt in the air. People that invokes the dock, or even describe the dock, whether it's like, oh, the dock is a little wobbly. Oh, okay. Now that gives you a sense that it's something that's not been taken care of, or that it's very old, right? So there's all kinds of things that information that you can give the players without telling them, oh, it's a real old dock. You can just tell them, oh, it's a kind of wobbly. They're like, oh, okay.
So they'll know what that means, right? Or they'll have an idea in their head.
Or in their own
Maybe
head.
It's not the same idea as you have, right? Because when you say the docks, to me, I'm thinking of where the ships take off all the supplies and then there's storehouses and
right. So obviously, when you describe or or say something, it's going to invoke all kinds of
Different images for
images.
people.
And then when you give a little bit of description, it might hack away at all these possibilities and get a more unified view of what the docks look like.
And sometimes your players will go, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
Or is this what you're describing, or this is what I'm seeing, right?
Why is it wobbly? Is it damaged?
Yeah, or
is it old?
so be prepared to let them. What do you think, or this is what it is. This is what I see. This is what
ideas.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. I think that, like I said, when you have a player having a conversation with you during role playing, that's what you want. That's what role playing is about. And I think descriptions can help you get that kind of gameplay.
So it seems like a simple thing, but think about what you're describing and kind of go with it, right?
Right.
Figure it out, what the people want versus what you're trying to convey.
Yeah, and use all the senses. Just don't use the sense of sight.
Yeah.
I think it was a lot of people were saying is that the more senses, you don't have to include every sense in every place, but
you don't have to go down the 5 senses or actually there's probably more. But you don't have to just tell the specific things for each scene.
Somebody said that there was like 12 senses, I guess, but some of them we don't have. Like I don't have the Spider-Man tingly sense, so I don't have that sense.
So hopefully this is helpful to you in your you're thinking about when you're describing things, so your players aren't bored to death or don't have enough information.
Right. I think
one way or the other.
That's two. Those are two very important things.
Yeah.
One, they're not bored, and two, they have enough information.
Because when you're describing something, you can go overboard with your description, right? So their players are falling asleep at the table, or you can't describe it enough, and then they're thinking one thing and you're in a totally different space, right?
Right.
So, because you don't want to be on a nice dock that's rickety versus a dock that's gonna, is totally different.
Right.
So there you go. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
You have a good day.